Welcome, silent travelers. Welcome to the hidden dimensions of surrealism. Today, we are going to explore the precise, frightening moment when your necessary sacred healing becomes the existential nightmare of those who once controlled you. Carl Jung, the deep-sea diver of the unconscious, once etched a fundamental truth into the annals of psychology, a truth so profound it still gives seasoned therapists a chill of recognition. He wrote, "The tree that reaches to heaven must have roots that go down to hell." What he meant, precisely, was simple, and yet terrifying in its scope, a law of psychic conservation. The deeper you are forced to fall, the lower your descent into the shadow, the higher potentially your subsequent ascent can soar. The abyss of your pain is merely the necessary inverse. Ultimate, limitless potential. But here is the crucial caveat, the terrifying nuance that Jung rarely illuminated for the common reader. When someone who has truly been to hell, who has spent time navigating their own private underworld, when they finally return to the surface, they do not come back as the person who left. They cannot. They return as something entirely new, something utterly transformed, a psychological mutation. A being that the world, and particularly their past oppressors, has never witnessed from them before. And that level of complete, fundamental psychological transformation, it utterly terrifies everyone who only ever knew the wounded, compliant, easily manageable version of you. If you have spent long, exhausting years of your life being the one who absorbed everyone's unrelenting toxicity, their emotional garbage, their projected chaos, the one who stayed tragically quiet when every fiber of your soul screamed for you to set a boundary, to rage, the one who bent your will, sacrificed your truth until you almost snapped and broke completely, becoming a fragmented shadow of yourself, then this profound message, this illumination of the dark mirror, is designed specifically for you. Because what is coming next in your life, what is currently manifesting in your internal landscape, is not merely gentle healing. It is a true seismic psychological earthquake. The people who consistently strategically hurt you, the ones who casually mistook your necessary silence for total surrender, they are about to encounter something that sits outside their manipulative understanding. They will experience what Jung documented in his most esoteric texts, the inevitable return of the integrated shadow. And when that shadow, that powerful, suppressed aspect of your being, returns to the light, fully integrated and attached to a conscious, sovereign will, it does not waste time asking for permission anymore. It does not pause to negotiate its terms. Today, I'm going to show you exactly why your magnificent, inevitable comeback will be the single most terrifying thing that certain people in your immediate past will ever witness. Not because you will seek petty, satisfying revenge. No, that is beneath the new you. But because you will become completely, utterly unreachable, psychologically impermeable to the very tactics, the very subtle manipulations, the very emotional leverages that once destroyed your peace. This is a complete, structural, and permanent decoupling from their power source. Let us ask the foundational question. The question the alchemists and mystics would pose: what happens when the person everyone used as a convenient, bottomless emotional dumping ground, when that person finally decides they are completely done absorbing the waste, and they start to fiercely, truthfully reflect it back at its source? The world is filled with people, the manipulators, the toxic consumers, the psychic vampires, who observed your profound kindness and fatally mistook it for stupidity or weakness. They watched you cry during your deepest moments of vulnerability, and they wrongly concluded that they had successfully broken you, that they had secured total victory over your spirit. They saw you retreat into a necessary protective spiritual silence, and they smugly assumed they had won the battle, securing your permanent submission. Every toxic person, every conscious or unconscious manipulator, every draining energy vampire in your past made the exact same fundamental error in judgment. They truly thought your deep, painful wound was your immutable, core identity. They believed the hurt, compromised, apologetic version of you was the only real version of you that existed or ever would exist. They had absolutely no idea that while they were mocking your distress, They were watching a powerful spirit enter the cocoon and ignorantly calling it weak, simply because it could not yet spread its wings and fly into sovereignty. Jung spent decades of his life studying this exact, magnificent pattern of psychological rebirth and self-creation. He meticulously documented case after case of people who went through what he called the dark night of the soul, a complete, necessary, violent psychological breakdown that looked like total, irreversible destruction from the outside perspective, but was internally a radical reconstruction of the highest order. And here is what his decades of observing human ascent revealed, the secret detail that changes everything about your personal narrative. The people who descend the lowest, the ones who brave the deepest, darkest shadows of the self, are often the ones who rise the absolute highest in their individuation. But they do not return in the meek, palatable way anyone expects. They do not come back soft or easily forgiving or overly sympathetic to their past oppressors. They come back precise. They come back unmovable. They come back complete. Let us delve into the miscalculation of your oppressors. Think now profoundly about every single person who consciously, methodically hurt you. During your lowest, most fragile, most vulnerable point in life, the friend who abandoned you immediately when your desperate need for support was truly critical. The family member who kicked you when you were already utterly down on the psychological floor. The partner who betrayed your fundamental trust when you were completely open, exposed and vulnerable, believing they were your safe harbor. Every single one of them made the same profound, monumental assumption, the same fatal error in their manipulative strategy. They truly thought your vast, immense capacity to feel deeply was a fundamental, exploitable weakness. They concluded that your profound empathy was nothing more than a psychological flaw they could easily leverage and weaponize. Teach. I assumed your necessary retreat into a protective silence meant you had fully, meekly accepted defeat and submission. But here is the core, hidden truth, the deep realization that Jung unveiled, that they will never, ever be able to comprehend in their shallowness. Silence is not always submission to the aggressor. Sometimes, silence is a focused, powerful observation, an intensive period of internal study and data compilation. Sometimes, a strategic retreat is not total, permanent defeat. It is a necessary, spiritual, and radical preparation, a profound gathering of your scattered internal forces and fragments, while they were carelessly celebrating what they truly believed was your permanent, irreversible destruction. You were deep within the self, in what Jung called the sacred incubation period. You were tucked away inside the self-made transformative cocoon, meticulously integrating your shattered parts, and they fundamentally mistook your psychological transformation for your inevitable death. They mistook the quiet for the end, the classical psychological term for the arduous internal process you endured is the mythical night sea journey. Jung famously borrowed this vivid, profound concept from ancient universal mythology and the structure of heroic narratives. The hero, which is the vulnerable, unintegrated aspect of the self, gets swallowed whole by the symbolic whale of the unconscious. They descend into the terrifying total darkness of the psychological deep, confronting the demons of the abyss, and they emerge utterly, fundamentally transformed by the darkness itself. But most superficial analysts, most of the world, consistently miss the crucial, terrifying detail of this mythic journey. The hero does not come back to meekly make peace with the whale, to negotiate terms with the DA. The hero comes back as a completely new, integrated being, one that the whale can never swallow again, because their energetic signature has changed. That is your current, undeniable state, silent traveler. That is the architecture of your new self. You are not the same naive, pliable person who initially got hurt and compromised. You are the integrated, unyielding version of yourself, the version that cannot be hurt the same way twice, because the pathway to the wound has been permanently closed. That previous porous vulnerability is sealed off forever. Here is where the psychological mechanics become intensely interesting and deeply unsettling for everyone in your past. While you were silently observing their patterns, while you were meticulously healing your core, while everyone else was convinced you were permanently broken, Something profound and revolutionary was happening in the deepest well of your unconscious mind. Something Jung called the crucial process of shadow integration. You see, your shadow is not inherently evil. As outdated, simplistic morality might suggest, your shadow is merely every potent, powerful, protective part of yourself that you were meticulously taught to suppress, to lock away for the immediate comfort and convenience of others. Your righteous, protective anger, your capacity for absolute, fierce, non-negotiable boundaries, your ability to say a complete, unwavering no, your capacity to walk away permanently without any explanation or justification, your willingness to finally let people face the inevitable, harsh, and necessary consequences of how they strategically treated you for years, perhaps decades of your life. You kept that immense protective shadow locked away in the basement of your psyche because you were taught a toxic, manipulative lie that good. People never get angry. They never set inconvenient, hard boundaries. They never cut people off. They never stop caring about the abusers. You were indoctrinated to believe that your inherent value came exclusively from how much profound discomfort and abuse you could tolerate and endure. So you tolerated everything with a false smile. You absorbed everyone's constant dysfunction and chaos. You made yourself perpetually smaller so others could confidently feel bigger and more secure in their ego. You carried everyone else's enormous, crushing emotional baggage, while they casually criticized you for moving too slowly under the impossible weight they placed upon you. But something definitive, non-negotiable happened during your darkest, most isolated period of retreat. You finally met your powerful shadow face to face in the stillness of your soul, and instead of running from its darkness in fear, instead of pushing it back down into the depths, you performed the ultimate, revolutionary, and life-changing act. You integrated it completely. You looked at your legitimate, powerful, self-defending anger, and you declared, "You are not my enemy. You are my most necessary form of protection." You looked at your capacity for firm, unyielding boundaries, and you affirmed, "You are not mean or cruel. You are absolutely essential for my spiritual survival." You looked at your capacity to cut off toxicity instantly, and you recognized, "You are not cold. You are sovereign, wise, and selectively generous with my energy." Jung called this complete, profound integration, this union of light and shadow, the sacred process of individuation. It is the final, total act of becoming entirely whole by fully accepting, embracing, and utilizing all parts of your complex self. Even the powerful, sharp, defensive parts that society or your past oppressors told you to vehemently hide, to shame, to bury forever. And here is the precise, intricate reason why this structural process is so utterly powerful and so profoundly terrifying to certain select people in your past orbit. Once you fully integrate your shadow, once you become psychologically complete, whole, you are no longer operating from just your wounded, people-pleasing light side. You are no longer the exhausted, compliant empath, desperately trying to be good enough, desperately seeking approval from people who will never, ever truly appreciate your inherent worth. You are now operating from your absolute whole self. Shutterstock, explore. This new self, this integrated being, is a profound union of seemingly disparate forces. It is the necessary marriage of light and dark, softness and sharpness, kindness and an unyielding, unmovable, unbreakable core. The version of you that is actively returning is not trying to prove anything to anyone anymore. That is the true hidden source of its terrifying new sovereign power. The old, wounded you would have spent hours writing long, frantic paragraphs, attempting to explain your new boundaries or your perspective, hoping for validation. The new, integrated you simply does not explain. There is absolutely no need for justification. The old you would have frantically, instantly apologized for things you didn't do wrong, just to manage their discomfort and avoid conflict. The new you does not apologize for existing. Your presence is finally your own justification. The old you desperately needed people to understand your perspective, to validate your pain, to acknowledge your reality. The new you does not need anyone's understanding. and requires absolutely zero external approval for its choices or its existence. And this absence, this profound lack of dependence, is precisely why your comeback will terrify everyone who only knew the wounded, compliant version of you. They built their entire toxic relationship, their entire manipulative dynamic with you, solely on your ingrained willingness to shrink, to compress yourself, to disappear. They got comfortable. They felt utterly safe and superior with a version of you that absorbed their toxicity without reflecting any of it back to them. They cleverly weaponized your profound, genuine empathy, leveraging it against your best interests. They ruthlessly exploited your abundant, premature forgiveness, taking it as a weakness. They mistook your monumental patience for implicit, perpetual permission to treat you however they desired, whenever they desired. But now, silent traveler, now when they look at you, something is chillingly, undeniably different. They cannot quite name the change. They cannot intellectually categorize it, but they feel its undeniable, magnetic, disruptive force. You are no longer reactive anymore, which utterly unsettles their entire strategy, because they were entirely counting on your predictable emotional reactions. You are not explaining yourself anymore, which deeply frustrates their desire for control, because they were relying on you defending yourself while they were busy attacking your sanity. You are not chasing their volatile approval anymore, which terrifies them to their core, because your need for their approval was their singular, absolute source of power over you. Jung documented this exact, observable, energetic phenomenon extensively. He noticed that when someone truly individuates, when they become psychologically whole and irrevocably centered, they emit a completely different, solid, unshakable energy. Signature. It is not loud. It is not aggressive. It is not mean. It is simply solid and unmovable. It is the stillness of a mountain. There are zero cracks left in your composure for manipulation to slip through and take hold. There are no psychological buttons left for them to push, because you have meticulously disconnected every single one of them. And to the people who only knew how to relate to you, through control, through subtle, insidious guilt, through overt manipulation and chaos, this new, complete version of you feels like a hostile stranger. A stranger they cannot by any means control or categorize, and that sudden, absolute, irrevocable lack of control over your spirit, that is what truly terrifies them, down to their core. Let us now dissect precisely what they are experiencing, what is disrupting their reality, when they look at the new, unmovable you. Even if they lack the profound self-awareness, the vocabulary, or the courage to articulate it, they are encountering what Jung defined as the mirror effect. For years, you functioned seamlessly as the sponge. You were the willing absorber of their psychological waste. You absorbed their constant, relentless toxicity. You were the repository for their endless, frantic projections, their deep-seated dysfunction, their casual, entitled cruelty. They could be cruel to you repeatedly, and your programmed response was always to return, meekly asking what you did wrong to provoke them. They could commit the most profound betrayal, and you would forgive them instantly. Often before they even managed the psychological effort of an apology, they could completely ignore your most fundamental needs, and you would swiftly convince yourself, through self-gaslighting, that your needs were simply not important enough to matter in their presence. But the moment you fully integrated your shadow, the moment you performed the inner work to become psychologically whole, you immediately, structurally stopped being a sponge. You became instantly, terrifyingly, a mirror. Now when they project their toxicity, their chaos, their criticism, their shame at your being, it does not absorb into your soul's reservoir. It is reflected with chilling, undeniable clarity directly back at them. When they try their practiced manipulation tactics, they see their attempt clearly reflected in your calm, unbothered, non-reactive refusal to engage. When they try to induce toxic guilt, they see their own guilt-tripping tactics exposed in the unmoving stillness of your protective silence. When they attempt to gaslight you, they see their own lies, their own deceit, their own fractured reality revealed in your profound willingness to believe and trust your own perceptions now. This psychological effect, this forced confrontation with their own reflection, is utterly devastating for them. Because most manipulative people, most toxic souls, operate entirely from a place of profound unconsciousness. They do not consciously, maliciously plot every move. They simply execute deeply ingrained, survival-based, habitual programming. But when you become a mirror, when your wholeness creates that unyielding surface, you force them to immediately see the ugly truth of their own behavior. And most manipulative people cannot psychologically handle the confrontation with the reality of what they see reflected back. So, they inevitably do exactly what Jung predicted they would do in this scenario. They escalate the tactics. They try harder. They try desperately. They try more frantically to trigger the old, predictable, controllable you back into existence. They love bomb you with excessive, sudden attention. They crank up the volume of the guilt trips. They suddenly play the victim, citing your unforgivable cruelty for having changed the rules. They try to activate your historical empathy by acting profoundly hurt that you've dared to establish boundaries. But here is the foundational truth, the deep realization that Jung unveiled, that you must internalize and embody now. Their desperate escalation is not because they genuinely miss you. It is because they desperately miss having power over you. They do not miss the relationship itself. They miss the toxic, comfortable, parasitic dynamic where you were willingly beneath them, perpetually available. They do not miss your physical or emotional presence. They miss your relentless, exhausted tolerance of their emotional absence and negligence. They do not miss you. They miss the broken, self-abandoning person you were willing to be for their convenience and comfort. This is precisely where your comeback becomes truly, existentially terrifying to their ego structure, because the old, unintegrated you would have witnessed their escalation and immediately thought, perhaps I'm being too harsh now. Maybe my boundaries are too cruel. Maybe I should grant them one more chance. Perhaps I am actually the problem here, as they claim. The old you would have desperately convinced yourself that setting firm, necessary boundaries was an act of profound, unforgivable cruelty. But the new you, the completely individuated you, instantly sees their frantic escalation for exactly what it is, a pathetic, desperate, transparent manipulation tactic. And you do not react to it. You do not engage with its demands. You do not explain why you are finished. You are simply, irrevocably done. The conversation has ended within you. This is precisely where your conscious non-reaction, your utter, magnificent lack of engagement becomes the final, existential death blow to the entire structure of the manipulator's ego. Because the old, unintegrated you, that person was a deeply predictable, easily targeted, and reliably triggered supply. The old you would have witnessed their escalating desperation and instantly felt the profound, familiar, compulsive pull of obligation, the urgency to respond, to explain away your boundaries, to fix the discomfort, to try and manage the conflict, to achieve a fleeting conditional peace. The old you's heart would have instantly started racing uncontrollably, flooding your body with the toxic chemicals of fight or flight stress hormones. Your mind would have started frantically rehearsing justifications, composing paragraphs of complex defense, all aimed at validating your simple need for peace. You would have instantly felt the searing self-inflicted guilt for simply daring to have boundaries, for daring to choose your own sovereign peace. But the new you, the completely individuated you, that sovereign self, feels something utterly different now. In the face of their testing, you feel nothing in response to their trigger attempts. Not anger, not deep sadness, not even a passing flicker of satisfaction or triumph. Just a calm, clear, absolutely unmovable nothingness. A profound, protective, internal indifference that completely shields your entire being from their chaotic energy. This indifference is the spiritual death knell for their control. It is the signal that their game has ended. Jung wrote extensively about what he termed participation mystique. This is the key to understanding the depth of their panic. This is not simple friendship or partnership. This is the unconscious, profound psychological bond, the energet, IC umbilical cord, that forms between people who are spiritually and emotionally mismatched. In healthy, secure relationships, this bond is mutual, respectful, and serves to energize and uplift both parties to greater heights. But in toxic, narcissistic relationships, This bond becomes fundamentally, profoundly, utterly parasitic. One person, the manipulator, feeds exclusively, ravenously, off the other's constant emotional labor, their steady stream of validation, their willing acceptance of guilt, their total willingness to suffer and stay compliant. And for years, you were the one being relentlessly, systematically fed upon. You were the continuous, reliable, self-replenishing supply. But when you integrated your shadow, when you performed the difficult structural sacred work to become psychologically whole, you performed the ultimate necessary surgery. You severed that parasitic bond completely. You burned the energetic bridge. You cut the energetic cord, the psychic attachment that gave them open, unfettered access to your most precious resources, your empathy, your energy, and your time. And now they are experiencing profound, agonizing, disorienting withdrawal, a cold turkey panic that disrupts their very core. That is precisely what you are witnessing when they suddenly reappear in your life, acting utterly confused about why you are suddenly unavailable and unmoved. They cannot process the loss because it is a loss of control, not affection. That is what is truly happening beneath the surface when they say things like, "You've changed," with a tone of profound judgment and disappointment in their voice, as if you owe them the wounded, controlled version of yourself for all eternity. That desperation is what is driving their current, pathetic, escalating attempts to provoke you, to get any reaction. Then a negative one, because their ego requires external validation of its importance, because any reaction at all, any engagement, means they still have some minuscule remaining access to your precious, finite energy supply. But you are not giving them access anymore. You have shut down the supply line permanently, and that complete loss of supply, that utter, chilling unavailability, that is what fundamentally terrifies them, down to the core of their needy, brittle ego. Their universe, which was you, has collapsed. The great, profound irony, the unexpected karmic twist of fate that Jung would deeply appreciate, is this. They created the exact version of you that they are now terrified of facing in the light. Every time they hurt you, and you stayed silent, you were not being weak, you were studying them. You were gathering comprehensive intelligence on their predictable pathology. Every time they betrayed you, and you absorbed the pain, you were not being naive. You were compiling data about their ultimate, unchanging, compromised character. Every time they pushed your boundaries, and you did not push back, you were not being a doormat. You were compiling a complete, damning psychological profile of their exact tactics and limits. And now, you possess a complete, undeniable, internal, unshakable understanding of exactly who they are and what they are capable of. And that self-acquired, unshakable knowledge is a source of power they can never, ever take back from you. It is sovereign. You know their manipulative patterns intimately. You know their preferred tactics by heart. You know the exact words they use to induce guilt and shame. You know the precise vulnerabilities they seek to exploit in others. You know the full destructive spectrum of how they operate in chaos, and they know, on a gut level, you know everything. That realization, that perfect, complete, unblinking visibility is what creates the cold, existential terror in their eyes when they now look upon your sovereign face. It is not that you are going to expose them publicly to the world. It is that you could, but your superior peace chooses not to. It is not that you are going to retaliate with emotional revenge. It is that you don't need to. Your profound, unbothered indifference is a more potent, final consequence. Your profound, total, self-centered indifference is infinitely more powerful than any petty, emotional revenge could ever be. It is the ultimate, absolute boundary. The cycle is finished. The negotiation is over. You have performed the sacred structural surgery. You have severed the profound parasitic tie. Now you stand fully realized in your own psychological architecture. You are subject only to the powerful inherent law of your own self-respect. The toxic person operates on a very specific, deeply flawed psychological principle. They believe, fundamentally, that everyone operates exactly like they do. They believe that your past kindness was merely a strategic positioning. They assume your immense empathy was secretly manipulative. They conclude that your forgiveness was a sign of total, exploitable weakness. They relentlessly project their entire shadow psychology, their own inner chaos and deceit, onto your clean slate. So, when you finally cut them off, completely and irrevocably, they immediately assume you are playing a complex manipulative game. They think you are trying to manipulate them into chasing you. They believe you are waiting for a grand cinematic apology, so you can finally claim a position of power over them. But you are not playing any game at all. You are not waiting for anything from them. You are simply profoundly, spiritually done. And that cold, hard, unblinking reality, the fact that you genuinely do not care anymore, is utterly incomprehensible to their ego structure. Their system cannot process non-engagement. They keep checking your social media feeds, compulsively, frantically waiting for some small sign that you are still thinking about them, still agonizing over the loss of their presence. They keep asking mutual acquaintances about your life, hoping to hear that you are struggling without their drama, that you are suffering in your new peace. They keep creating little, pathetic, desperate situations, hoping you will finally predictably react. But you don't, because you are not thinking about them at all anymore. You are entirely preoccupied, busy becoming the highest, most integrated, most authentic version of yourself. And they are not even a footnote in that profound, ongoing story of your self-creation. Jung wrote that the true privilege of a lifetime, the highest reward of the inner journey, is to become who you truly are. And that is exactly what is happening in your life right now, silent traveler. You are actively shedding every false, suffocating identity, every people-pleasing mask you meticulously built to desperately try and sustain people who were never going to be sustained or pleased anyway. You are releasing every single trauma bond, every unhealthy, addictive attachment you compulsively maintained because you mistakenly confused loyalty to them with profound self-abandonment of yourself. You are stepping into a version of yourself that exists completely independently of anyone's external judgment, approval, or total disapproval. And that version of you, the version that is complete, integrated, whole, that is the version that terrifies everyone who knew the wounded, compliant to you, because the wounded you was predictably controllable. They knew the script. The healed you is utterly sovereign. They have no access codes. The wounded you desperately needed external validation to feel safe. The healed you reliably, consistently generates validation internally. The wounded you was paralyzed by the existential fear of being truly alone. The healed you understands that being alone is infinitely, profoundly better than being perpetually diminished by toxic company. The wounded you mistakenly thought love meant endless, exhausting sacrifice. The healed you knows that love means unconditional mutual respect, or absolutely nothing at all. This is your majestic comeback. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is not vengeful, it is simply absolute, it is complete, it is final. You are not coming back to prove anything to anyone else. Your worth is self-evident. You are not coming back to finally get closure from people who never had the spiritual integrity to give you honesty. You are not coming back to make them understand what they did wrong to you, because their lack of understanding is their own prison. You are coming back to yourself, and that sacred journey back to your own center requires leaving them behind permanently and without regret or explanation. The most powerful, final sentiment Jung ever shared about this self-actualization process was this: I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become, and you have chosen to become someone who no longer allows themselves to be a repository for other people's chaos and spiritual dysfunction. You have chosen to become someone whose internal sacred peace is now absolutely non-negotiable. You have chosen to become someone who understands that the people who cannot genuinely celebrate your growth, who are uncomfortable with your ascent, were never meant to be in your future anyway. So when they look at you now, with confusion, with deep frustration, with that unnameable, icy fear in their eyes, understand what you are witnessing in that moment. You are seeing the definitive moment. A manipulator realizes Their manipulation no longer holds any power over you. You are seeing the moment a narcissist realizes their external supply has irrevocably dried up and is gone forever. You are seeing the moment a toxic person realizes the person they once took for granted has become completely spiritually unavailable to them. And that unavailability, that profound, unbothered indifference, that calm refusal to engage, that is what truly terrifies them, because it means they have lost something they can never, ever get back: access to your inner light and energy. Your magnificent comeback is not about them. It never was. Your comeback is exclusively about you, reclaiming every single piece of yourself, every ounce of energy that you gave away, trying to desperately maintain relationships with people who were not maintaining you in return. Your comeback is about you, stepping into the vast, undeniable power that was always inherently yours, but that you were taught to suppress out of fear and obligation. Your comeback is about you, choosing yourself with the exact same fierce, uncompromising loyalty you once gave to people who never once chose you back in a meaningful way. And if they are terrified of that powerful version of you, good. Let them be. Their internal terror is not your responsibility to manage. It is a necessary consequence. Their profound discomfort with your new healthy boundaries is not your problem to fix or soften. Their inability to manipulate you anymore is not so. Anything you need to apologize for or justify. You are done being small, so others can feel big. You are done being wounded, so others can feel powerful. You are done explaining, defending, and shrinking yourself for the comfort of unhealed people. Jung spent his entire life studying human transformation, and he concluded that the ultimate psychological achievement is individuation, becoming completely, authentically, and wholly yourself, regardless of external demand. And that is exactly what you are doing right now. You are not becoming bitter, you are becoming boundaried. You are not becoming cold, you are becoming conscious and careful. You are not becoming cruel, you are becoming complete. So to everyone who only knew the wounded you, who got comfortable with that version, who thought that version would last forever, your return will absolutely terrify them. Not because you've become someone bad, but because you've become someone they can never manipulate again. And to people whose entire relationship with you was built on your willingness to tolerate mistreatment, your refusal to tolerate it anymore feels like the total, terrifying end of their world. And it is. It is the end of the old world, where they had power over you, but it is the explosive, glorious beginning of the new world, where you have absolute, sovereign power over yourself. If you recognize yourself in this transformative journey, silent traveler, comment below. Write the simple, powerful phrase, "I am done explaining myself," because that is the unmistakable, non-negotiable mark of true integration. The moment you stop explaining yourself to people who never truly wanted to understand you anyway, that is the moment you become truly, utterly, irrevocably free.